the group that really inspired my brother and me were the Impressions with Curtis Mayfield and all of those great songs. And then when we went to college at Cheney State outside of Philadelphia, we had a classmate, Eddie Holman. And we heard he was on campus, and my brother positioned himself in a place called the Snack Bar where everybody went, and Eddie went by and he stuck his leg out and tripped him. And they became really good friends. And Eddie taught my brother about playing the piano, and they were every place on campus that had a piano, they were in there, and every place threw them out. But Eddie took us down to a studio in North Philly, and that's where we met Norman Harris, the great guitar player, Ronnie Baker, the great bass player from Philadelphia, and Earl Young, the drummer. In fact, Earl founded the Tramps. Earl turned 79 a week ago today, and he's still above ground and playing. But getting in there in the Philly sound and meeting all of those people, I remember we met Tammy Terrell. One of my fraternity brothers was her cousin. I said, man, you're lying. But she really was his cousin. That was the time when she was having those medical problems. I had erroneously thought it was because David Ruffin had allegedly hit her in the head with a hammer, and that was the source of her problem. But it was cancer. And we auditioned for her. She told us to go to New York, not to Detroit. And long story short, we signed with a guy in New York. He promised us a royalty check every week, and we were starving up in Germantown. And we would call him. He said, it's in the mail. So we thought the mailman had stolen our check. So we were getting ready to roll down on the mailman. And so eventually we made a audition for Gamble and Huff on a Saturday. We rode the streetcar 23 down to Broad and Olney, and these two police officers saw us. I guess we looked so desperate, like we might rob somebody. They got on the train with us and rode all the way down to Center City and watched us go into the Schubert building where Gamble and Huff and Tom Bell. Tom Bell was there, and we auditioned for Tom, and he said the big man is coming, and the big man was Kenny Gamble, and they loved us. We did 2 projects for them. One was for Archie Bell and the Drells, and the Jaggers. And after a while, they felt, well, they don't have it anymore. So someone in the office, Earl Shelton, tore up the contract, and my brother and I migrated to Chicago, and we did some couple recordings for Curtis Mayfield, but we always stayed in touch with Tommy Bell. And we went into Tommy Bell. We had a song called, for the Stylistics, entitled, I'll Never Get Tired of Loving You, which Tommy liked, but we also played Could It Be I'm Falling in Love. And Could It Be I'm Falling in Love, there's a guy from Philly named Billy Jackson that used to produce The Time and Peaches and Herb, and is it Paul Leka or Paul Lecca that did Green Tambourine or that Na 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 Na? They came to Pittsburgh to a recording studio, an R&B studio out in East Liberty called Steel City. Phyllis Hyman was there, and they came to listen to all of their recordings, and they only liked 7 songs, and all 7 songs were written by my twin brother and me. Billy Jackson asked for a song for Peaches and Herb, which turned out to be Could It Be I'm Falling in Love, which they turned down. They said they could write a better song. And Paul Leka took a song for Gloria Gaynor called Honeybee, which was a monster disco. It's one of those seminal disco recordings. And Tommy, when he recorded Could It Be I'm Falling in Love, and I listened to it, my brother and I, we didn't like it. We didn't like it because he changed the beat. If you ever listen to Regina Bell's version, it's a brighter version. And he said, I'm going to give it the Al Green beat, which he did. And he played it twice. And the second time he said, in 6 weeks, this song is going to be a million seller. And it was. And he told my brother and me, every song you write for me from this point forward, I'll give you 50% of your publishing. The song I'll Be Around, when I heard that in the studio, I said, Tommy, that's a hit. And Tommy said, no, man, it's a B-side. And he made it a B-side. And the DJs flipped it. And it just, and then Could It Be I'm Falling in Love came after that. And my brother had the idea to change our names and use a pen name. So we said Mystro and Lyric. And the song got so big and everybody thought Tom Bell and then the Creed wrote it. But they didn't. And by that time, other people in Philadelphia learned that we wrote the song. And they wanted us to sign one of those contracts. And when I thought about it, I couldn't see the value of signing. You know, if you have talent, you believe that your talent will make room for you. But as a person named Alan Leeds, do you know who Alan Leeds is from Pittsburgh? Alan Leeds, if you saw the movie Ray, not Ray, but the one on James Brown. When James Brown was in that radio station and he had that white DJ, that was Alan Leeds. Alan Leeds' father used to be the president of Horns back in the day. And Alan Leeds was James Brown's road manager. He did the same thing for Prince. He's up in Minneapolis now. But he told me something in the record business. He said there are two types of people. There are pimps and prostitutes. And I didn't want to be a prostitute. So we didn't take that deal. And sometimes when I look back on it, I would have been rich if I had moved to Philadelphia, but I probably would have been dead too because everybody was doing drugs. And if you didn't do the drugs, that peer pressure would force you to do that. And so in retrospect, I'm not rich, but I am rich. I have my wife and kids and they're doing well. And I was an educator. And some of my students, because I came back to Aliquippa and I found some kids who couldn't read, football players. And as a result of that, I went back to Duquesne University and ultimately to the University of Pittsburgh. And so now I am Dr. Melvin Steals, PhD, educator. So I have lived in two worlds. But every time I get around those music people, it's fantastic. A month ago, my brother and I went to Detroit for a live TV show. And we were with a guy named McKinley Jackson. McKinley Jackson was Marvin Gaye's musical director. When he was 16, he played his trombone on Ooh Baby Baby. He was part of that Motown thing. And when Doja Holland left Motown and started Invictus Records, his group, the Politicians, were the Funk Brothers. And he was a part of all of that. And then do you know who Paul Reiser? Paul Reiser's on the TV show too. So my brother and I talked about the Philadelphia experience and they talked about the Motown experience. And it was a wonderful experience. And we've come up with this concept that we call the Mo Philly sound, where we're blending the best elements. And there's a niche market, especially in Europe and Japan. And so we're currently working to do something along those lines. Oh, it started on a Saturday night when we were 8 or 9 years old. We would have to take the obligatory weekly bath, and we were small enough to fit in the same bathtub, and we would emulate the music that we heard on the local R&B station. But when we took our show on the road to the second floor living room, my mother would get highly upset and incensed, and she would yell, "You sound like a pack of wild dogs." And my brother was so into it that he learned how to play the piano. He took lessons, but Eddie Holman really taught him how to put a song, how to structure a song. And the very first song that we did, we had a group called the Four Perfections. And we had a song, Mervin and my first song that we wrote called "I'm Not Strong Enough." And today, a good copy of that song can sell for as much as $1,000. In England, up in Manchester, they have something called Northern Soul, and they love American music. And in 2014, a guy from England who was living in Spain contacted me and asked me, if he wanted to interview me. There's a book called The Philly Sound, and he interviewed me, and then he wanted me to put the group together, and they wanted to fly us to England. And I told him, well, if my wife doesn't get on the plane, Dr. Steals is not getting on the airplane. And they paid for my wife, and we flew over. And I've heard people talk about it. The people in England who love our kind of music, they love it more than we do. And they knew everything about us. And these old men getting up on the stage, and we started singing. They had a band over there that could play our music. And I'll never forget, I heard someone in the crowd yell, "He sounds just like the record." There were grown men who loved that music so much, they were crying. And when they took us out, they treated us like the Beatles. I had never, ever had an experience like that. And there's a book, The Essential Northern Soul thing, where they list over 25,000 vinyl records from back in the day. And I went through there, and I found 22 songs that my brother and I wrote that are popular in England, Japan, and we wrote those songs in the 70s, 60s, and 70s. And on my last BMI statement, I saw 40 Steals Brothers songs. So those songs are still playing. It's that timeless music. And I don't know that much about Motown, but I was there in Philly when they wrote those songs. And the people who don't get enough credit are those musicians. There's a song that the Jaggers did. It goes, "I'm tired of chasing you, girl. It's about time you started chasing me." But when I heard it in the office at the Schubert building, it was a trite song. But when those musicians got on the floor and they start infusing their talents into that song, it changed. And I saw Gamble's head moving, and so those guys are every bit as good. Gamble and Huff are great songwriters. They had a philosophy. A hit song was a song that people in the bar went to the jukebox and played over and over, because a songwriter's function is to say in a melodic way and poetic way what people feel. And the biggest part of their songs is what Mitch Miller called the sing-along. And Gamble taught me how to structure a song and the sing-along, and I still follow that format. In fact, on Wednesday, my brother was in Philly. We're recutting "Could It Be I'm Falling in Love." I have it on this, but we're going to do two versions, an original, like the Spinners sang it, but we're going to make it a gospel song. Like, could it be I'm falling in love with you, Jesus? And we're using part of Teddy Pendergrass's band. We use the OJ's bass player, and then we have people in Detroit, horn players, if we need strings. And so this is something, once it's in your blood, you can't get rid of it. My wife and I argues about the money since 2007. I've spent around $70,000 of my money. But if you're into music and you love the music, it's not always about the money. There's something that happens when you are creative. It's an emotion when you hear those music coming out of those big speakers. There's not a feeling like that in the world. And to know I wrote that, it's just fantastic. When you realize how many great musicians came out of Pittsburgh, Westinghouse High School. This is it's not Motown, it's not Philadelphia, but there's something in between. There's some great, great people came out of here. And I'm 73 now. I don't know, every day I tell people, literally, I'm in the red zone, tap dancing my behind off, doing my best not to make a touchdown in the end zone. I'd rather get a 15-yard or 50-yard penalty so I can go back. But whenever I have an opportunity to be creative or to say something to young people, we live in a very precarious time, and a lot of young people are not surrounded by the caliber of people that surrounded me. Even though my brother and my father died at 5, we grew up at a period of time in Aliquippa when the village was high functioning. People from every segment of the population, black and white, impacted my life, especially teachers, and that's why I became an educator. It's right where it needs to be, and people like Carnegie Mellon. There are a lot of talented people here right now. I was surprised to find out that there's a guy up in Wilkinsburg Heights who plays creative music. It's part of the Game of Thrones, the music. These talented people come and seek them out. So talent is here, and we could identify people and bring them together and do something. Back in the day, Billy Price introduced my twin brother and me to Ahmet Ertegun. When Ahmet Ertegun came here to sign Roy Buchanan, Billy Price had Billy Price and the Rhythm Kings, and they played some of our songs for Ahmet, who loved it. But he told my brother, the white boys can't do these songs and he wanted us to get on his private jet and fly to New York with him. And we couldn't because my brother worked in the steel mill and I was an educator. So we went up 2 weeks later, and we went in his conference room, and when he came in, he looked at my brother and me. He said, "You guys will always be in the record business, and those 40 songs that are still being played attest to that." And then he said, "But I'm doing business with some people in Philadelphia with whom I'm making a ton of money. And if I do anything at all to further your careers, it will adversely affect my business relationship with them. Therefore, I can do nothing for you." And then he said it again. And then I began to realize, there's that promotion piece, and we didn't have that piece. And because we didn't have that piece, and like the pimps, they will humble you, they will humiliate you. And so our songs didn't get the airplay in America. And as I say, I used to be very angry once I realized what was going on. But I do believe in God, and God put me in those schools. And I'll just tell this one story, and I'm going to shut up. I was at a funeral about 4 years ago, and at the end of the service, one of my former co-workers had passed away, and I was in the aisleway of this church. It's called the Church in the Round in Aliquippa, and one of my former students came up and hugged me, and then he walked 6 steps and he turned around and looked at me and yelled, "You know what?" I said, "What?" He said, "You need another hug." My student turned around and looked at me and said, "You know what?" I said, "What?" He said, "You need another hug." And he came and he hugged me. And then his brother, Kevin, came over and Kevin hugged me. And then Kevin stood back and he looked at me and he said, "You know, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be where I am today. When I was in your 11th grade English class, I had a 0.6 GPA. I put him and 2 other football players and a young lady into a summer program called Reading and Study Skills. And he benefited from that program. He got a full athletic scholarship to Ohio University, graduated, and is a very successful businessman in Charlotte. Another one football player I put in there was a senior, National Honor Society, got accepted to Columbia, but when they gave him a diagnostic test, they found out that he was reading on the 9th grade level, getting ready to go to one of the best universities in the universe, and they told him, if you come an extra day per week, we'll work on your reading problem. And when they gave him a diagnostic test, he was reading at the 9th grade level. And at the end of 6 weeks, he had brought it up 3 years. And he graduated from Columbia with a 3.2 in economics. And I paid for him to go to that program because he didn't have a father like me. And he paid me back in 2 ways. He gave me the money, but he gave me an application for a summer program at Wharton called the Lead Program in Business. And that's where my son went, to Wharton. And then he went to Dartmouth. I have a picture of my son getting his MBA from President Clinton. And, so you see how all of these things work together. No matter how bad they are, the man upstairs has a purpose. It's a molding and a shaping process. And, I've had bad times, but I wouldn't change anything about my life.